of Bitcoin Live on Sunday. Today with me in the show is Johnny Law. Welcome to Bitcoin Live.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. Truly appreciate it. I've enjoyed your shows from almost the get-go. I kind of found you a little bit later, but your conversations that you have with different people in the industry, talking freedom, talking tech, is always inspiring and fun to listen in on.
Well, thank you very much for that compliment. And we have been sort of talking back and forth on Twitter for a while now, and I really enjoy your point of view. But for the people who don't know you, can you just give us a short introduction of who you are and where you come from?
So yeah, my short introduction is I've been around blockchain for quite a while now. Really just started out as a cheerleader, right? I kind of understood the theoretical aspect of what it represented and how it could certainly be useful in the coming future. But then got a little bit curious about why some things were happening in ways that I didn't quite understand, and started digging in a little deeper to understand the dynamics of what was going on behind the scenes, what it truly meant to form sort of a decentralized organization and the challenges that represents. Try to get to know all these volunteers that were committing their time and effort and talent without any sort of compensation, and figure out how I could truly be supportive. So that's kind of been my journey, and I'm still on it. As we know, this is a very challenging environment to stick true to the core principles of why crypto was created in the first place. And really, that's my intent. That's my hope.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's also my basically my journey in crypto, sort of along similar lines. I know you come from the Digibyte community, and I truly love Digibyte a lot, also because of its decentralized nature, and it's sort of very vocal about liberty and freedom, and everything sort of humane principles that sort of should guide us. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of your Digibyte background and the Digibyte community?
Absolutely. I was, like I said, a cheerleader for a long time, and then started attempting to understand why my own sort of analysis on the fundamentals didn't line up with what I was seeing in the marketplace. And so it's just started kind of digging into how the market works, and really got me interested in on-chain analytics. And began sort of tracking movements and addresses and all that sort of stuff, and wanted to do my best to focus in on education, so that everybody maybe could come to a similar place of understanding that transparency is what this is all about. And to that end, I joined Digibyte awareness team for a bit, and really got to know some fascinating folks that were working behind the scenes and out front, trying to bring awareness to what the protocol can accomplish, and why it's important. And some really great people taught me a lot of lessons, and decided in the end it would be best if I was on my own, as sort of a passive observer of everything, but trying to contribute as much as I could in as many sort of scenarios as I could. And from there, just worked within the community and got to know a lot of other passionate people that are focused around building truly permissionless, peer-to-peer free markets. And that's kind of where I continue to work today, in the education side, and building out and helping build out tools that further the ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of similar friends. Gonzo Boards is, of course, very famous, and Renzo. And Trejo is also here in the site. So it's really nice. I really like the sort of liveliness of the Digibyte community, and what it stands for. And I think that's sort of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about why decentralization is important, why projects that sort of support freedom are important, why self-custody is very important. I think that's a passion of yours, and I think it's also one of mine. Why you should own your own keys, but probably also we're going to talk about where the world is heading. So of all these topics, which we're going to try to cover in an hour, where do you want to start?
It's May again, and last year at this time we launched not your keys, not your coins, a kind of return to fundamentals about how crypto came to be and why it's important to have self custody of your coins versus trusting what is essentially a bank once again. And I think we brought a lot of awareness at an important time in the crypto history, and then we saw kind of the fallout of people trusting centralized exchanges thereafter. So I certainly let's start there. I think we're largely back where we began even last May. So we had all of these exchanges that were participating in shady business practices, essentially, not unlike what we see from banks, to be honest. And then there was consequences of that, and those consequences affected real people. And it's painful to watch, and it's painful to see that we're kind of back there again, where people have already forgotten the lesson of 8 months ago and are now trusting exchanges once again to custody their coins. And I know they're getting forced into some of those options by some of the regulatory changes that are coming. Certainly, I tried to buy some Ethereum even last night, and the hurdles to jump through to even get Ethereum at this point is kind of mind blowing.
For Americans, it's much harder, right? Because the tax system that you have and sort of the rule system that is in place is very difficult for you to sort of just buy ordinary. For Europeans would be ordinary tokens like Ethereum. Because for us, it's still pretty easy to go to an exchange if you want to use an exchange and to buy some Ethereum or some Algorand or whatever it is, or Digibyte, the Decred. But I think in America it's quite hard, right?
Yeah, the KYC requirements are much different in 12 months' time, and we talked about the tightening of those on-ramps, and on-ramps was going to occur. We knew that was coming, as the language around self-custody is really one of fear that many of these governments put out, because ultimately I believe they understand it's something that they can't control once it's kind of out in the wild. So they're trying to just limit the number of people out in the wild, so to speak.
Yeah, because basically what you're talking about is trying to buy these tokens without KYC and without AML, right? And if you want to do that would also be very difficult in Europe. Actually, I wouldn't even know how. If you ask me, that would be kind of difficult.
But think about that from 2 years ago to today.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's a totally different ball game where we are now, and it will get much worse, right? Because they will start probably also unlisting certain projects that don't walk the line, or that they don't like. Because right now you still have like a large section of actually the whole crypto community or the whole crypto space at your disposal, but that will probably likely change in the future, right?
Yeah, no doubt it will. It'll continue to tighten. And that's really, as we think about, owning your own keys or having custody of your coins and having complete control. Yeah, you can see my latest little graphic there, which will get integrated a little bit later, but not your keys, not your choices. And that speaks to the freedom aspect of what self-custody and crypto is really all about. And I think ultimately, until people understand they've got to take responsibility for their own essentially place in the marketplace, we're going to see continued tightening, and not only in the crypto market, but certainly in the fiat market as well, as some of those arbitrary regulations come into play in their everyday in terms of what they can and cannot buy and how they can and cannot use their fiat money. And from the 15-minute cities to the carbon control goals. It's all pretty clear as to which way it's going. And I think the first step, and really I'm just trying to simplify, was to get folks to take responsibility for how they're participating in the marketplace by truly becoming their own bank and controlling access to some foundational layer currency.
True, and of course use decentralized exchanges. So that's something. I mean, when I often talk to friends and family and colleagues, and why crypto is important, but also especially why you should self custody your crypto, they often look at you kind of bewildered, like, what are you talking about, and how do you even get started? Because most people that I know, they don't actually have they don't have their own wallet, right? Or they don't even fully understand what they are buying in most cases, because they only see it as an investment or a speculation. So they see these tokens, but they have no idea that you can actually transact with them. Most of them haven't even ever transacted with, for example, Digibyte or Decred or even Bitcoin, for that matter. So there's still, a huge discrepancy or sort of blind spot with most people, and that's of course because they trust the current system and they think everything is still sort of under control and okay, and they haven't experienced hyperinflation or a Great Depression. So they haven't lost trust in the system completely. So how do you think we could fix that, besides sort of doing shows and interviewing people? And what would be the best way to reach ordinary people and to make them aware of why the crypto space is very important and could be a solution to all these problems?
Well, that's a big question, brother. It's one I've thought of many times and struggled to answer many times, because ultimately it does come down to, I believe, each of us who do have a good fundamental understanding of why this space came into existence, going out into our real life spheres of influence and holding people by the hand and kind of waking them up within our own community, and not just here online, but in person, one-on-one, with our friends, with our family, and helping make relatable sort of examples and how it's showing up in their lives right now, whether it's looking at their groceries receipt from this year versus their grocery receipt from last year, and asking them why they think that's occurred, and then walking them through. But it's such a long process to get someone to wake up to the problems of this world, and it takes a relationship in which there is trust on a one-on-one level, and then walking them through bit by bit, because you cannot simply red pill someone all the way into the moment that we stand. It has to be this very sort of gradual and consistent effort to make people question the nature of the reality that they perceive. And I guess the answer to your question then is we've got to help people like myself understand how to do that, and kind of what the steps are in terms of setting up community meetings, in terms of where do you start, in terms of how do you create more people that are capable of leading that conversation, because I truly believe it is not going to come from it's helpful to have speeches here on the internet and even in mass media, but certainly I think it doesn't become real for someone until someone that they know and trust in their world helps them understand what all has occurred. And the chaos that is in society is for a purpose. It's to distract us from truly contemplating what's going on, and how we could potentially react, and what some of our solutions may be to start to become the change that we want to see in this world.
So basically, you would suggest to most people who are listening out there to get into your own community, like physically meet these people face to face, take them by the hand, and help them, or set up local independent communities. I think, one of the things that is also often missed is that you have to sort of have a self-supporting system around you, right? Because even people like us who might be sort of financially sort of independent or sort of safe, we got our life jacket or our lifeboat, depending on how big it is. But you also need a support system around you, right? To spend your coins and to buy groceries or to
That's right.
grow your own food, because it's very difficult to be your own support system like 100%.
Yeah, and that's the critique of many, right? This space has been focused on asset speculation alone for quite some time. I think for that reason, because there's not a an easy way to simply pay your bills, right, and to go out into the world and get what you need from it. Because the idea of trading digitally, a coin for a physical product hasn't quite reached that sort of mass acceptance that is kind of required, right? And even those merchants today that do accept cryptocurrency, by and large, are flipping it right back to fiat and selling it back into an exchange somewhere. And I think that's by design too. So to your point, I do believe it becomes setting up peer-to-peer free markets within your own community, and getting enough people that understand that we can transact in this way locally without permission, and that it could potentially begin to connect smaller communities that might have something to offer with one another, so that we kind of have our own import-export even within communities based on the talent and the resources available to those communities.
Yeah, and that's of course also kind of scary, right, for the people who are veterans in the space, to sort of let go of your coins and to actually spend them in the wild, and to find people who accept them as currency, right? Because to sort of set this up, what you're describing is you would also have to talk to and transact and negotiate with people who actually don't know crypto and might not want to accept it as payment for the eggs that they have, or the meat or the milk or whatever it is that they are selling. So on the one hand, it's very easy to use it, right? I mean, especially something like Digibyte, it's like so quick, so fast, so cheap
Right.
to transacting it, and it also goes up in value. So it has a lot of, and it is decentralized and private, and it has all these features that you would want from a decentralized currency. But then you have to find somebody on the other end of the transaction that actually wants to have it, or actually understands what you're giving him or her.
Yeah, no, and I'll point to somebody right now that's working through that. His name is Bart Simmons. He's a rancher down in Texas, and I think his website's provisionhouse.com, and he's somebody that understood that there was a problem with all of society, but also with healthcare system, with money issuance. And so he was one of those kind of freedom fighters that started understanding how crypto could potentially be a solution to making sure that his business continued to operate in an environment that was, quite frankly, hostile to ranchers that were raising cattle. And so has already, I know, begun trying to understand how do you start to transition to a crypto economy. And so people like that, I think, that know that something is fundamentally wrong, but have very deep skill sets in, say, ranching or farming or whatever the case might be. They need advocates. They need trusted partners to help them make that transition. And I think that part is really challenging. Because they know that something needs to change. They're just not sure how to change it. And their deep skill set is in something very different from what we're discussing. So I think that's a big hurdle to overcome. And how do we help them? How do we hold their hands and start to create organizations that can help them make the transition?
Would this also not be like because you have these grants, right? I mean, most crypto projects have quite a treasury. and that's still available to them. I mean, they're sort of still able to operate. Isn't this also a way for them to use these grants to sort of set up local communities to sort of, for example, this ranger, he could probably use an investment from somebody to have, like, for example, a crypto project supports the ranger in this case, or other people?
I mean, it would make perfect sense if a protocol was truly trying to serve decentralization and furthering a permissionless ecosystem. That's exactly what they would spend grants on, rather than marketing and giving their tokens out to different universities for study and marketing. I'm looking at you, Ripple community.
Yeah. My brother is really a Ripple fan. I won't go into that, but I totally believe that, and I think also to your earlier point, right? How do people wake up, and how do you wake them up? You know, the way I sort of look at it when I also talk to other people about it is, it's sort of like a zigzag, right? Every time you got sort of a collapse of the system or an emergency, or things go wrong, then another segment of the population wakes up from their slumber, and they look around to say, like, what the hell's going on? I didn't expect this. And that's sort of the moment that you can reach those people and
That's
bring
right.
them in. Or because they're disoriented, like they're trying to find orientation in the chaos. So that's sort of the moment that you can sort of reach these people. But they can also fall back asleep, or come to exactly the wrong conclusions and ask for more government intervention and more. Um, so
Yeah, and
I think it's
that's
sort of like a battleground to sort of, each time something goes wrong, we have to sort of be ready to get these people on board.
yeah, and I think that's been one of the biggest challenges. I think you hit the nail on the head. Although in a little different way. I think we have all of these people that are thrust forward as influencers, who are truly just charlatans to the ecosystem, most
Yeah.
of which take advantage of all the things going wrong in the world to enrich themselves. And I think I can think of a ton of people and projects that 100% talk about decentralization and virtue signal about how this could solve the world, really only to scam people out of money. And I think even some of the community meetups are very much the same. You end up with these type of individuals that have no shame in going in and telling people what they should do, rather than asking smart questions, rather than helping them kind of discover truth on their own and equipping people to make good decisions. They instead say, trust me, give me money, and I'll lead us out of this. And between you and I, that's nonsense, and that's what continues to happen. And those are the people's voices that continue to be lifted, because ultimately money creates influence, and VCs are operating everywhere. There's dark money in all corners of crypto, because it should solve some problems, but you can just as easily twist the narrative and line your own pockets.
Absolutely agree, right? So you do have to be careful on who to trust, and that's kind of ironic, right? Because we're trying to push a trustless systems, and we're asking them to trust us. So there is sort of, but basically our message, or when I speak in the plural here, is that we ask people to become a self custodying, but also self reliant, right? You want
Yep.
actually people to become individuals again. So we're not really asking them to follow us. We're actually asking them to wake up, take responsibility of their own lives, and start reading into this and doing their own research and getting started. And then we can help them do that as best as we can, right? I mean, I'm also not 100% self-reliant. I mean, I'm not going to claim that I know everything or something, but as a community, you can sort of help each other and fill in the blanks where, everybody has his own expertise and his own challenges. So you can sort of help each other out and balance each other.
That's right.
But you have to find your community.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I like to say that I I trust the block, right? I trust what I see on chain, and not on all protocols, by the way, but on a number of protocols. Um, and there are some people out in this community that I 100% trust, that I would, trust my own family with, and that's come through time and interactions along the way. Like, I feel like I know who they are, and it's not to say that I know every aspect about them, but I know their heart, because I've seen them give, I've seen them hurt in many cases, because of giving too much. And those individuals are, they're priceless to me, and those relationships are as well, because it's important that we do have people that we can trust, right? To bounce ideas off of, to discuss, to talk about our failures, but also share our successes with. Um,
Yeah,
and it's
because
going to be a Go ahead.
because you also need like an emotional support network, right? I mean, or a social network, whatever you want to call it. Because even if you have like you got your financial independence, maybe you got your own food and resources independence, even then, right, you still need people around you that you can trust. You need people with integrity around you, and
That's right.
preferably with a specific skill set that sort of adds something to the group. But even if they don't, right, everybody can sort of contribute in their own ways to achieve something.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of being human, right? The only things that really matter from my perspective, is the relationships that we forge, and the experiences that we share together, right? And working together ultimately to help kind of create this win-win environment in a world that truly, fundamentally, I still believe, thinks that it's a win-lose environment, that in order for me to win, somebody else must lose. And I think that's just a false reality that's been projected on us. And so there's going to be work to do, and it's going to take a long time. And I think that's the part I really didn't initially understand, what the time scale looked like, for sort of making this pivot. Right? You talked about pivotal moments earlier, that is teachable moments, when people get to a breaking point in which, if somebody's there, can help guide them out of it and help them see kind of how they got there, and some of that wasn't necessarily within their control, and how to what are the steps to getting out of that, and what can you learn from the moment. I think we're going to see a lot more pivotal moments moving forward, in which, as long as we respond appropriately and we've built relationships here along the way, we can help guide more people. This tribalism that we see within crypto is 100% going to slow our progress to developing into a win-win sort of ecosystem, because the failure to recognize that not all, but a good portion of these protocols can actually serve the same purpose and are much stronger together than they could ever potentially be apart, is 100% getting in the way of probably some really good people beginning to work together and build those marketplaces that are needed in order to actually transition. So from a timeline perspective, I know it's going to take much longer than you or I want to see happen. But I still believe it's 100% possible, so long as we continue to do the work every day.
So to shift gears a little bit, where do you see the world going at the moment, and where could it go?
Yeah, so I think from a tech perspective, the innovation in both automation and then just generally speaking manufacturing at scale, I do believe means that we're in an interesting place in which our standard of living can be raised across the globe with minimal effort. And that poses all kinds of challenges, and those challenges are trying to be solved right now by a group of people who believe that they alone have the answers. And I think that is problematic, because the conversation isn't being put to the general public in a way that everyone could potentially understand that we're kind of at this pivotal moment in society in which we can certainly, sorry, saving goodbye to my daughters there. This this pivotal moment in which we may not have to labor as hard as our ancestors. We're already not laboring as hard as our ancestors, right? So each generation has lived, at least in the developed worlds, quite a bit easier lifestyle than the previous one. So as we get there, we have to
sort of shifting at the moment. It's starting to shift.
Yeah, it is starting to shift, because ultimately there's some goals around consumption out there that they're trying to target, and but I won't go into it. I think there's enough of us, though, that can kind of see what's happening, that so long as we build and continue to build permissionless marketplaces, we can kind of change the narrative over time to get us back to more of a natural existence. We reap what we sow sort of scenario. But also, I do believe that automation, I believe AI can certainly be helpful in creating a higher standard of living across the globe. And I also believe that, nation states are a thing of the past. We just don't quite know it yet. And that if we're going to, as a people of planet Earth, sort of bind together using technology and communication that didn't exist even a decade ago, we're going to have to start thinking in network states. And essentially asserting our rights where we live as human beings born onto this planet, and not accepting that we're given rights by the state when that is absolutely not the case. We are born with those rights, and there's nobody that should grant them to us or pretend as though they have control over us. And I think that's where we're at. I think everybody's kind of felt this encroachment and just accepted it until it starts to overreach, and then we push back.
I always like to say Bitcoin or decentralized currencies, they decentralize people, right? And it also decentralizes politics, because I don't think this whole solution will come through politics. I mean, I think we should try to walk that route as best as we can, and to support candidates that you think or that represent you, or that you feel that represent you, and hold them accountable and push them in the right direction, right? But I think ultimately this change won't happen through politics, because I think politics distorts, it divides, and I have never ever seen a solution come out of it so far. So
yes,
yeah, I think we should,
I was going to say, Thomas Sowell likes to say there are no solutions, there's only trade-offs, right? And so I think he was spot on, and the man has written, I mean, my little library here is kind of full of it. Has written a great number of books. If you've not had the opportunity to dive into the mind of Thomas Sowell, I would just highly recommend it.
Oh yeah, and while we're talking about, there were like two books that really sort of changed my life, because I used to think differently before before I dove into gold and crypto, and that was Friedrich Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, and I read it in conjunction with Thomas Sowell's A Conflict of Visions. Well, that was a really powerful combination that cured me almost instantly. And of course, I read a lot of Stockman and Zero Hedge, and a lot of other interesting thinkers out there. But those were sort of my main sources to get me on the right track. Also, like Doug Casey a lot, the international man.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one other thing that sort of, there's also a lot of discussion of how should you message, right? Should you focus on the positive, or should you focus on the negative, or is it a combination of both? How do you look at that?
I think it is a combination of both. I was having this discussion with somebody around cognitive psychology, and specifically around the use of propaganda and how it's used to shape a narrative and to steer a population. I was talking about it in the context of training sessions as well. And you're not trying to manipulate anyone, but you have to understand that we're up against this entire mechanism that is highly developed and is 100% attacking the individual in ways they don't understand. In the television shows that they watch, in the movie theater when they go, in the notifications they get on their phone, in the news segments that pop up, right? They're all pulling people into a certain direction. And that narrative changes pretty frequently, and it doesn't tell people where they're trying to go. It just kind of pushes them into accepting these different realities, right? And at the basis of cognitive psychology is like this. If you're going to take a group of people on a journey, right, and you want them to get from point A to point B, you can't tell them they're going to point B. You have to create all of these circumstances that move them closer and closer to point B. And you can never tell them where they're going. You manipulate them essentially into moving closer and closer to the intended outcome. You alone know the outcome of where they land. And that's propaganda, right? So that's the basis of it. But it's such a sophisticated system in place. If we don't have a similar well thought out strategy to help bend that narrative back towards fundamental truth, we will fail, because they're using 100% biohacking, right, of the brain and how the brain works to achieve their goal, when we're simply trying to ask people to be reasonable. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not a winning solution.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think Harari said it best. We finally know how to hack the human brain. He was very happy about that. But I think you're right. People are being nudged in a certain way. They have no idea where they're going. And I also think, because propaganda is often used like in a negative way, but the original meaning of propaganda is just to propagate. And if you if you propagate the truth, or a sound ID, there's actually nothing wrong with propagating that or using propaganda to do that. But it's gotten like a negative connotation because propaganda started being used explicitly to propagate bad ideas, right? And to sort of use repetition and all the stuff that you see from commercial insights, over the years have, grown so fast. I mean, I really love to plug another book from Robert Cialdini, Influence, where he sort of distinguishes these 6 characteristics of, what triggers people. But then he says at the start of the book, you should only use these things for good, right? You should only use these marketing techniques to sort of promote positive messages or to promote good products. But, he admits in the book itself, for example, like Niccolo Machiavelli was another example of that. You can also use all this knowledge that's inside this book to do something evil or something that's not good. And I totally agree with you that people who are aware of how these things work and who have read up on them and seen them in life, that they should make people aware of how they work and how they're being influenced, and that they should start thinking for themselves, right?
Yeah, no doubt. It's kind of a similar conversation of how we started, right? Taking responsibility for self, right? And ultimately, that's where we go back to not your keys, right? What's the first step is helping people understand small things they can do to sort of take back control over something as simple as the coins that they hold. If they've made it to this space where they own coins, right? Which they don't really own any coins until they're off of an exchange, just to be clear. What you own is access to an account in an internal ledger that says this account potentially has this amount of Digibyte or Bitcoin or whatever the case. At any point, that logon can be shut off, and we've seen it happen many, many times, right? So getting people to understand that ultimately, until they remove coins or tokens from an exchange, they own nothing. The same is true in their bank accounts right now. They don't own any money or dollars. They own a entry in a ledger, none of which can be proved.
Yeah, and then I think that sort of ties in nicely with where the system is heading, because like you said, sort of these states, they basically are dissolving, right? We see it around us, and they're fighting against being dissolved. Like we said earlier, Bitcoin decentralizes people. Digibyte does that too. This decentralizes politics, but it also dissolves over time the state, the nation state. And you get these file systems of a network state. And I don't think you get the best of both worlds, like a global community, but it's not tied to a specific state or land. But so they're fighting against, they're basically fighting for their lives, right? To retain that power, to retain that influence, and to steer people in the opposite direction, which is actually leading to extreme centralization so like we've never seen before. Which ties into CBDCs, but also tokenomics, right? Like you say, everything is digital, and people often forget. People don't really understand the difference between Bitcoin and Digibyte or decentralized currencies and their bank accounts. Like it's also digital, or a digital euro, like the euro, or what the Fed is building. What is it? Fed now is like sort of a stepping stone to a CBDC
Bitcoin.
system in America.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also argue in the same way, because tokenomics is of course a huge industry, and our next show is also going to be about tokens and what they represent. But basically, it is also through Robinhood apps and all these other things. You can now trade stocks and commodities and all these kind of things like tokens, right? It has sort of made these stock investments and trading available to many people around the world who couldn't enter the stock market before. And that's in a way good, but if it's on the centralized ledger, they can also, just like CBDCs, be taken away from you, right? And
yeah, without a doubt. You're essentially you're contributing to a system that is built to siphon money out of people's hands. It's as simple as that. It's no longer, from my perspective alone, right? It's my perspective. There's no free market, right? It's all stakeholder capitalism. And so this idea that you can invest in gold and that gold's valuation is real, and that what you see in the marketplace is a result of market participants' actual actions in the marketplace, I think is all, at this point, to your point, it's so centralized in control, and you have so little transparency as to what's going on in the marketplace. And I'll liken this back to CoinMarketCap, right? So it's my favorite example, because CoinMarketCap is owned by Binance, right? And you access CoinMarketCap and report your tradings as an exchange through APIs. And those APIs are supposed to have confidence algorithms built into them to assess the likelihood of the trades that are being reported, right? And then they give trust ratings based on that confidence algorithm. But you can't see that algorithm. You can't see the order book. You don't even know if that exchange really exists or holds any of the coins, tokens, or anything else that's reporting to trade. And yet, they're allowed to have an impact on the marketplace.
Yeah.
Tell me how that works out. And then Binance, where now probably 70 at least % of all of the market activity is occurring through Binance or its subsidiaries or cloud-based exchanges that are tied to Binance, doesn't necessarily publish their order books. They don't publish the perpetual trades. And even if you go online and you look at the order books in live, there's no way for you to know that what's being represented on that screen is real, that there's a real person behind it or a real entity or institution. They can publish whatever the hell they want, and it has an impact on the marketplace. Derivatives are like that, and derivatives are being used not only in the crypto sphere, but all across the metals market, silver, nickel, gold. We've seen it deployed many times to control sort of these price outcomes in an asset speculation environment, because price in an asset speculation environment is 100% belief. And if you can control belief, you can control participation. And that's where I go back to, like, understand why you're in this marketplace, understand what we're trying to create. And if you truly are here to help with permissionless peer-to-peer free markets, you're going to take your coins off an exchange, and you're going to help build marketplaces that actually do what crypto and Bitcoin specifically was invented to do.
True, true. Yeah, and I think, at the moment, there's still, I mean, the system is going haywire, right? We see that around us, and it's sort of breaking down, and the global cooperation is breaking down because, the big nation states, they recognize what they are doing to each other and with their own population, so they stop trusting each other. So we see it sort of the trust breaking down all across the system. But right now, they're still using heavy-handed, heavy-fisted ways to sort of direct people in a certain way, creating these emergencies, using like the influence, like you say. But once they get those CBDCs and once they tokenize the whole ecosystem and everything becomes digitalized, or at least, enough, then they don't need those heavy-fisted approach anymore, right?
That's right.
They can specifically target you, stop all your cash flows. They can stop your travel. They can stop your stocks. I mean, they can stop anything they want about you, or they can say, like, you have to do this, and then you get access to that, or you get X amount of. They can really steer people to do something, because at the moment they can only basically tell people. They can basically lure people to do something, or they can sort of distract people. They can sort of distort reality, but they cannot really specifically force you to do something if you are aware of you being manipulated, right? But once they get this sort of system in place, it doesn't matter if you're being manipulated, because then they can simply force you to do something, even if you don't want to do it with your whole being, right?
Yeah, no, you nailed it, right? It's what I call fiat regulation, right? And not in the way that we're thinking. It's about the entire infrastructure of penalization and incentivization surrounding programmable cash, right? Because you don't have to create a regulation anymore for how you spend your money. It's all programmed in the cash. Like, there's no voting necessary. You just change the protocol to fit whatever narrative you're going to spit. And, oh, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way anymore. Here's why. Okay, well, whoops, that happened. Yeah, sorry about that, but this is how we're going as a society. Be a good citizen, and we can unlock that for you so that you can, buy some more meat. I didn't realize there was 3 people in your home, so you get an extra kilogram a month, sort of scenario. And it's laughable, right? But ultimately, that's I believe where we're headed with programmable cash, and what we have to kind of. I'm not saying that we can stop that progression, but what I am saying is that we can build parallel systems that are outside of those sorts of controls. And not to say that we're trying to be illegal in any form or fashion, but if it comes to this place where you've got to get permission to go see your family 100 miles away, that I think everyone can recognize is not a good outcome. And that would not be justice in this world. And we've got every right, I believe, as individuals to stand up to that sort of injustice that we're starting to see show up across the globe.
And another question about CBDCs, and I'm kind of curious about your answer, is do you think it is even possible to sort of regulate CBDCs? I mean, like with through law system, do you think the law system still holds up in a CBDC controlled nation?
Like, there's no accountability right now where we live, right? There's only arbitrary prosecution. There's no real accountability for anything. So law and order is kind of out the window at the moment already.
True.
For one, that's my fundamental perspective. So CBDC becomes that law and order through the program itself and adjustments of that program and blacklists and whitelists and all of the essentially features afforded by a protocol that can be programmed and changed on the fly and seized and reversed transactions and all sorts of things, which a lot of folks don't necessarily understand. Like even USDC has the ability to update that contract and make it more centralized over time, which they've done a couple of times, and they participate in the Center Consortium sort of thought process in which they're trying to signal decentralization, but what they're really attempting to do is assert controls over what was supposed to be a permissionless environment. I just think they're going to use the money because it's much easier to control a population through various narratives by controlling the money supply and how it all works versus at the end of a barrel. At the end of a barrel, it's very easy for everyday citizens to understand something's going wrong, that's not right. Like, we can't have that. We can't have government telling us that, we can't go outside more than an hour a day during some pandemic or whatever at the end of a gun. But it's easier to say, like, hey, if you go outside, there's going to be $1,000 fine, and we're just going to deduct that from your account.
True. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you can also incentivize people in a positive way, right? You get a grant if you do X, Y, and Z. So
sure.
Yeah. But I think that would also basically be the end of politics, or it would be, if it's still around, it would be like a complete charade. It almost already is, but you sometimes have like a candidate who at least seems to be authentic and comes out of nowhere with a huge following. But from that moment on, you can basically eliminate all political opposition, right? It becomes impossible to organize yourself or. So we're sort of heading to the end of the show, but how do you see this transition? Because that's also something that I'm often sort of thinking about and curious about. And I wonder how do you see that? How do we get from A to B? And do you think, anyway, that's the question.
A big question, my friend. I feel like we're going to have to spend some more time, and maybe I'll even try to organize my thoughts. It's such a mess up here. I can't even begin to explain sometimes. But that transition is, well, it kind of makes me sad, to be honest, because I feel like it will only come with pain. In which people experienced real hardship in their everyday life. Maybe their Netflix account gets turned off or something.
That would be very painful.
or their favorite video game, they can no longer afford it or something. I doubt that would ever happen. You got to keep the masses happy.
A lot like Harari said, give them drugs and video games, right?
It's right on. But I think there's a good portion of us, and it doesn't have to be everybody. It just has to be, 2 to 3%. I like to say, at the start of the American Revolution, only about 3% of the population actually supported throwing off the control of the British Empire. It was some staunch, libertarians, for lack of a better word, that decided that they had had enough of what they were seeing in their local communities and decided to band together and start to try to create a more perfect union, so to speak, a better system of governance. And I think we're kind of there. And for us to expect that we're going to have this sort of mass acceptance of that ideology is kind of juvenile. I think it's going to take a lot of pain on individuals like myself and you and others, trying to work our way through, like, how do we build for our own children and for the next generation something that we would be proud for them to grow up in.
Yeah, I fear you're probably right. I think we're sort of we crossed the point that, you know, it's very difficult to imagine a way out of this mess without pain and hardship. I just really hope that there won't be like a major war, because that's something that you know, that does keep me up awake. How do you look at that? Do you think it's likely or unlikely, or?
Yeah, and I've shared with you, I think, that, you know, I don't necessarily believe that the East-West narrative is entirely real. I do believe it is part of an effort to continue to distract and to continue to work in the larger narrative as to why certain things have to be done, or why we have to send money and support to Ukraine. And it's such a mess. I don't have the answers to that question, but I do believe there will be more conflict, more fear put into the total narrative of society, because when people are fearful, they tend to act in selfish ways, and that selfish sort of behavior, unfortunately, means that they're not able to contribute to a community effort, right? And so I think it's purposeful, once again. And we can fight it by, again, showing up in our local communities, helping people sort of have a different perspective, perhaps, and maybe start to ask different questions about what they see, what shows up in their feed, what they hear on the news, and then perhaps start to look for people that have an alternative point of view, to your point, one that is positive about how do we move forward together and create this sort of win-win ecosystem. What are the steps that we take right now? Like, what are the things that we can do in this moment that helps us not get all the way there, but make sure that the door is still open for later down the line?
Yeah, it's good to end on a hopeful note. So where can they follow you, and where should these people, these potential people who want to make a difference, sign up? What should they, you know, where can they best start?
Well, they should follow you and subscribe to your channel. So I'll start there. But you always have a lot of great conversations with many different perspectives, none of which pretend to have the answers to all the questions, but all of which are trying to find them, which is, I think, ultimately what everybody should be looking for. People who have all the answers are typically trying to steer you in a direction. And that's not what this is about. This is about pointing back to the individual and saying, you have purpose in this world, you have purpose in this space, and we believe that you can contribute. It just might take some time to work on yourself a little bit and understand. Follow me on Twitter, primarily Johnny Law 2021. That's where I post most everything that's going on in my little brain. But certainly we've got the Digibyte Discord. We're actually going to have today in our Discord about 3 p.m. So a couple hours from now, we'll have the developers talking about 8.22, which is our latest protocol upgrade. And so that's a cool place. You'll see that in my links today. I'll share that. Lots of good stuff going on, lots of developments going on. Renzo's working on a new Digibyte desktop wallet.
Renzo's
Matthew's Yeah, Matthew's working on a new version of DigiAsset Core, which is pretty cool. And then Komodo and I working through a mobile and desktop platform, Digibyte branded. So lots of cool stuff going on in the community. So jump in, get to know some folks, and start contributing.
Yeah, and on that positive note, I want to thank you for this interview. I think we covered a lot of bases, but we basically only scratched the surface. So you definitely have to come back on and talk more about it. I really enjoyed it. And I hope we help some people sort of to orient themselves and hopefully to get involved with Digibyte or Bitcoin or any other decentralized currency out there. There's quite a few, right? It's not all hopeless. So start getting in the space, start orienting yourself, start doing your own research, and start following us if you can, and start following Johnny Law and the Digibyte community. So with that, I want to thank you again for being on the show and for everybody watching, and take care.